And so when you talk to people and then you say, well, do you think you're going to buy more or less secondhand in the future? I mean, the numbers that say more are just like off the charts. You know, to shop secondhand before ThredUp was like a lot of work. And your offline consignment stores, by virtue of being like a small footprint, they can only stock like well-known brands. We sell 35,000 plus brands. So as a secondhand shopper, you now have access to this very long tail of super interesting brands that you may not have ever heard of.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. What if thrift wasn't just a trend, but the future of fashion? James Reinhart has spent the last 15 years proving that secondhand can scale, and that sustainability doesn't have to come at the expense of good business. James is the co-founder and CEO of ThredUp, the resale platform that's quietly revolutionized how we think about closets, consumption, and circularity. He started the company while getting his master's at Harvard, just a few doors down from the Rent the Runway co-founders, and he turned a simple idea into one of the largest managed marketplaces in the world. In this conversation, we talk about the logistics moat behind ThredUp's cleanout kit, why retail partnerships with giants like Walmart matters more than hype, and how AI is transforming everything from inventory to pricing. James also shares his take on the future of fast fashion, how to build consumer trust when your product is one of a kind, and the one risky early decision that changed everything for the company. This is James Reinhart's Social Currency. James, welcome to Social Currency.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
So prior to founding ThredUp, you were in a completely different field. You helped to develop one of the nation's most premier public schools. So how did you get into that space?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I really wanted to be a teacher. So I did history and philosophy at Boston College and tried to get a teaching certificate. And I was just really passionate about teaching in kids. And so when I graduated, I moved out to California and I was a teacher. And so I taught history and English to 8th and 10th graders, which is probably for another podcast. But I was really committed to that. And then in that journey, was working at this charter school that was developing what I thought was the best curriculum in the country, Pacific Collegiate School. And so I was there very early, and then we just helped build that up. And I was there almost 6 years.
And what does that mean exactly? Because when I was doing the research on you, I have no idea what goes into developing a school.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about what that was
Sure.
about?
So, so I wasn't there at the exact founding moment, but it was really a startup. And so it had a couple classes worth of kids. I think at the time it had probably 60 kids. And then they were growing the school up. And so they were adding a grade each year. And that meant, okay, well, what do we do about facilities? What do we do about fundraising? What do we do about developing the alumni network? How about college counseling? And so you start to take on this expanded role. So I spent a couple of years in the classroom, and then I was the development director, which basically meant raising money. I was helping do alumni relations for their first, few graduating classes. And then we had this grant called this dissemination grant, which is this random thing where I then spent time going around the country talking about how we built the school, sharing some of our best practices. But secretly, I was also learning a lot around what these other schools were doing. And so I just became really the right-hand person to the principal there. And so the principal was in charge of the education part, right? That was not my forte, but I really helped her and the board do a lot of the other stuff. And so it was an incredible experience. I think it actually prepared me a lot for what I ended up doing with ThredUp.
And so you go from that world and you decide to go get your master's from Harvard.
Yep.
Going from education to, of course, what you're doing now in the secondhand retail space seems like two completely different worlds. Yeah. So what led you to that transition?
Right. When I finished the work at Pacific Collegiate, I was really interested in education, just in the intersection between public and private partnerships. So I was really curious, what is the role of the federal government in education? What is the role of private foundations? What's a way that these organizations collaborate to improve outcomes for kids? And so when I went to Harvard, it was a joint degree program. So the Kennedy School of Government to focus on public policy, and then the business school to focus on sort of the business side. And I thought it was really the relationship between the two that would really help me improve sort of the public education strategy that I was on. And so like the through line, I think, from schooling to ThredUp is I was looking for sort of something to make a difference in the world, right? And so in its first generation, it was kids in schools. And so I thought business, public policy, Harvard, like I can learn a lot. In fact, I wanted to be a White House fellow. Like I thought at some point I would work in the White House. Obama had just been, elected, work in the Obama White House, something like that. And then we can sort of, fast forward into the sort of ThredUp idea. But that was the original genesis, was public education. And then I had a bit of a falling out with education and started wanting to sell clothes.
So there's a lot to dive into there. But tell me about that first moment. I don't know if it was an aha moment or some inkling that you had done all this work in the education space. And there was clearly something that piqued your interest with what the world that you're in now. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I think, my first year at the Kennedy School, I was doing a lot of work back and forth to California, helping, start this other school that was not Pacific Collegiate called Saba Academy. And so I was going back and forth. I was working very, very hard. I was in school. And I just had this moment where I thought, I'm not sure that I want to spend the next 25 or 30 years of my life in education. I had spent a lot of time in it, thinking about it. And I just started to have a moment of maybe this isn't actually right for me. Maybe I should do something else. And so I then began to think a little bit around what that might be. Now, mind you, at the time, I'm in a 3-year program at a very expensive school. I have no savings, right? Because I was a teacher and worked in education. My first job out of school teaching, I was paid $24,000 a year. So I genuinely had no money. What I did have was actually a closet of clothes that I had accumulated over a number of years. And so I went to sell them. And this is the genesis story of ThredUp. I went to sell them at this local consignment store because I didn't have any money. And they said, we don't take these. We just do luxury. And we don't do men's, by the way. And I was like, well, this stuff can't be worth zero. It doesn't make any sense. This is a J. Crew cashmere sweater. This is a Brooks Brothers coat. Yeah, not our problem. And that honestly was the moment. So I was a little bit sort of on the outs with pursuing education. Didn't have any money. And all of a sudden I had this clothes and this response from this woman. I remember the judgy woman, and it was this store was called Second Time Around. And I just there's got to be something there. And so literally the next day I went to school and I asked all the women in my class and all the guys, I said, what % of the clothes in your closet do you wear? And not a single person, women in particular, said they wore more than half. It's huh. And what are you going to do with it? So the next day I was well, I have a follow-up question. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. I'll just give it away. I thought, And then I just did some basic math. I was there's a lot of stuff out there that people don't value that we're giving away. And now remember, this is 2008. So there's a lot of disruption in technology. The iPhone had just been invented, right?
Wow.
Uber was just being invented, right? Airbnb, so you have all the combination of these new consumer experiences. And then this light bulb goes out of well, but why do we then live in a world where we all just wear stuff and then we eventually just give it away? And that's kind of how it got started.
Wow. So that pivotal second time around
moment. Yeah. And then I spent a bunch of time in coffee shops, kind of working on the idea. And I took some classes sort of loosely around this idea of marketplaces
And in the early days, so you had this epiphany that there was this really untapped opportunity in this space.
Yeah.
But you didn't build this alone, right? So what was that next step in getting your initial co-founding team involved? Yeah,
it's sort of funny. So I had a number of classmates in the business school. A guy named Andrew Ferrer, who's a close friend of mine. A guy named Will Bolin, who's still a close friend of mine. Brad Barkin, Neil Shaw. These were all classmates of mine that I was loosely in projects with in school. And I sort of co-opted them in some small way to be hey, let's work on this thing. Can you help me on this? And, I think for them, they were it's a school project. I don't care. And I was yeah, maybe it's just a school project, but I think there's a there. So I had a bunch of these smart friends working on it. And then they all went off to do the things they wanted to do with their life. They weren't wanting to do the thing I wanted to do. And at that moment, there was a guy named Chris Homer, who was sitting next to me in the first year, and he and I become friends. And Chris and I just started to like talk about technology and startups. And I had a college roommate named Oliver who was also sort of part of the founding team. But I was really looking for somebody with like real technology experience. So Chris, to his credit, said, I don't care about your idea, but I want to build technology apps. And again, this is 2008. This is like the dawn of many of these apps. And funny enough, to be here in LA with you, Chris's goal was to move from Boston to LA, get an apartment, I think in Manhattan Beach, and just build software. And I said, Chris, do you have any clients? No, but he was like, I'll figure that out when I get there, and no, he may have a different interpretation. This is my, and I was like, well, how about I'll be your first client. You'll then have a client to talk about and you'll help me build this thing. He says, great. And so that's how we sort of got started, and he started working on technology, and then I think he got very excited about what we were doing. And, that was sort of summer of 2009. And we just kept working. And then Chris came to me one day. He's like, this is pretty cool. Like, maybe I should keep working on this. Meanwhile, all his stuff is out here in LA in one of those pod trailers. Like he had an apartment. He had put a down payment on rent. I mean, he was fully committed. And we kind of turned that thing around.
Wow. And when I was reading about the Genesis of ThredUp,
Mm-hmm.
what I thought was really interesting was there must have been something in the water at Harvard around that time, because that same year, 2009, was when the co-founders of Rent the Runway also came together, right? Did you ever cross paths with Jen and Jenny?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, Jen and Jenny, they're good friends of mine. We were in the same business plan competition at HBS that year. And yeah, we talked. What was interesting is we didn't really talk about how similar our businesses would ultimately become. I think Jen and Jenny were very interested in the fashion space. Like it was very a pure fashion, play in its earliest days. Because remember at the time that was, you were renting really high-end dresses and it was making fashion more accessible. So I thought about Jen and Jenny as like a little different in what they were trying to do. I mean, they even had runway in the name. And I was like, I'm selling used clothes, like, right? But I think, since then, over the last, decade, I think our businesses have been, more similar, than different in our approach to thinking about sustainability, circularity, reuse. That also was a time. So the following year, Katrina Lake started Stitch Fix.
Yep.
You had Haley and Katya started Birchbox. So there was a number of consumer businesses, I think, at that time, 2009, 10, 11, that were getting started that I think we're all trying to think about what does the world look like in this sort of new technology commerce era.
And one last question to tie a bow neatly on your education experience, but I'd love to hear if there were any key lessons or learnings from that space that you apply to what you do today at ThredUp.
Yeah, I'm a bunch of them actually. I am a deep believer in the power of good strategy. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I speak with entrepreneurs all the time, and they have good ideas, right? I think they have good instincts, great instincts on what the consumer might think about a business or an idea, or maybe about product market fit. But the thing I often see lacking is like a deep strategy appreciation of, well, how am I going to build this business over time? Like, what does it take to build a business over 20 years, right? And so I think my time at HBS and my time at the Kennedy School, I think in some way burned into my brain like the power of really good strategic thinking. So, whether it's Michael Porter and talking about 5 forces, or I had the privilege of being in Clay Christensen's, like I sat with him like in class and get to do a few office hours with him, who influenced me a lot around disruption theory and what that actually means. And so yeah, I actually think I rely more on that HBS experience than probably I would have thought. Mm-hmm. But I come back to it all the time. And even our work, just in the last year around our investments in AI, have been heavily influenced by that time in HBS.
talking about the long-term thinking, I want to get into the ThredUp model and how this industry has changed so tremendously
yes.
over the last decade. But really, I mean, it is kind of growing at breakneck speed.
Yeah.
So I want to talk first about the model. So ThredUp has differentiated itself on many angles, but one of them is the positioning as a managed marketplace versus a peer-to-peer play. So, and it's been that way almost since the Genesis. So why did you take that route?
I think our insight at the beginning was, related again to my personal experience, was there, eBay was around, right? So you could, if you wanted, sell your own things yourself. You could online, you could go to the second time arounds, right? Or similar and stand in line and sell your stuff. But the primary research that we did, right? Talking to people about what they actually did was people were lazy, right? It was like, I don't want to go stand in line and sell my stuff. I don't want to sell my stuff on eBay, but I do value the idea of it going somewhere other than a landfill. And so I think that was the insight, is that there was an opportunity to make the market bigger if you got involved and did some of the hard work for the seller. And I used to always, in the early days, I mean, I still do it. If you go into a room of people, women, and 100 people, and you say, how many people have sold something on eBay or Poshmark or Depop or something in the last 6 months? You get like 10 women will raise their hand, like, oh, I've done that. How many of you have given a bag of clothing away to Goodwill or to a friend or something? You get like 100 out of 100.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is the insight, is that the market for this is much, much bigger. And so I thought, I was excited about the idea of really building something differentiated. And now that turns out to be a lot harder than peer-to-peer. I think you're building infrastructure and logistics. But I think our insight was to do something very, very difficult that would make the market bigger. And, and that's what we did. Yeah.
Convenience always wins.
It's convenience. And, I think the thesis has proved out over the last, 15 years. I don't think Americans in particular are getting less lazy. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an experience last night, it happened to be my 18-year wedding anniversary yesterday.
Congrats.
Thank you. And my daughter's 15th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I have 3 children, and everybody wanted something different, like for dinner, right? My younger kids wanted something. And in such a great San Francisco Bay Area moment, I ordered DoorDash from 3 separate places.
Oh, yeah.
And it all came in 30 minutes. And I thought, this is like a prime example of the laziness factor, like really taking hold. Like I could have made a beautiful meal for my wife, but she wanted something different to eat than I did. And my daughter wanted, tacos. So anyway, I don't know how we get into this, but the idea of convenience was a big part of it.
And ThredUp has built out a very complex logistics network that is also very unique, as you spoke to. Can you walk us through the clean out kit model and why it's been a moat for ThredUp?
Yeah, so the invention of the clean out kit was about 2012, I think, 2011, 2012. And the idea was that people have bags of clothes in their house and they don't know what to do with them. And the way it had worked for decades was you piled it into a trash bag or a brown paper bag. And then eventually you took it from your closet to your garage. Sat in the garage for a little while. Then it went from the garage to the trunk. Sat in the trunk for a little while. And then eventually from the trunk, it made it to a Goodwill or a Salvation Army. And I thought, well, that's sort of an odd experience for this stuff, because the minute that you as a consumer are done with it, that should be the moment when it gets a second chance. Like these items deserve a second chance. So it was, well, what if we send you a prepaid bag? It holds all the stuff you're no longer wearing. You just keep it in your closet or your laundry room, and you fill it up. And whenever if it's full, you just leave it on your doorstep to be picked up. And I think that insight around convenience and the branding of, oh, this is a thing I can do, every week, every month, and then eventually it fills up and you get rid of it, I think did 2 things. One, it created this new sort of experience for people of sort of habit around getting rid of stuff. And then the second is it was this branded experience. These, we settled on these polka dots, right? So it's very when it's in your closet or it's in your laundry room or it's in wherever it is, you're like, oh yeah, that thing, I gotta like do that thing. And then home pickup was a big breakthrough, right? You just needed to leave it wherever your mail was picked up, and we would grab it. And so yeah, that was the clean out kit. And then we would take it and do everything for you. And people were like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we'll ship it. We'll inspect it. We'll photograph it. We'll price it. We'll store it. We'll fulfill it. We'll handle returns. And then when that's all done, we'll give you the money that the stuff is worth. And people are like, well, great. And I think one of the important things is that we were trying to make the case to people that it's comparing the clean out service of ThredUp to what you used to do, which is to just give it away.
Mm.
And so for people for whom that's what they'd been doing, they thought what we had built was genius, right? Now, for people who had sold their things on eBay, right, or really thought about this as a way to make lots of money, for them it was different, right? And so there's been some education over the past 10 years in finding that right customer.
And speaking to that last point around the right customer, do you find that the ThredUp customer today is a different type of customer than the person who is listing all of their items individually?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that it has not without pain over the last 10 years trying to educate people on who we're for. And I always find it surprising people who go through the process of ordering a clean out kit and doing all this stuff without reading any of the detail around it, right? It's not for everyone, right? If you are trying to maximize every dollar of your used clothing, you absolutely should sell it on your own. 100%.
Yeah.
You're willing to do the work. You really have agency to do that. But if you're the person who is looking for convenience and doesn't really care about that last dollar, then ThredUp is perfect for you. And in fact, like in the early days, we were really trying to break through in this distinction. And I remember we designed this big red scary pop-up modal on the site. This had to be like 2012 or 13, where when you went to order a clean out kit, we like flashed up like a warning sign, and it was like, alert, like if you want to make money, stop now. And because we really wanted people to understand, like this is not for you. Like, and we did all these things. We even had something where when you used to send in the bag, like in the early days, we had something called the Pinky Promise. And basically we made you sign this little paper being like, I've read the rules and I'm not looking to make a lot of money. And again, it was just an emphasis on who we're for. And it's so funny how so many other parts of your life, it gets very clear. Like you wouldn't go to a fancy restaurant, sit down and be like, I can't believe this steak is $45, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would do that, right? You wouldn't order an Uber black car and get in and be like, I can't believe this is, right? Like you would order an Uber X, which is what, right? Like, and so there's all these ways that consumers make choices, and we're just trying to like help educate people on this. So it's a journey. It's a journey.
And speaking of other things that make ThredUp very distinct, I love that you mentioned the mint green color of the clean out bags.
Yes.
Was there a rationale for it's a very distinctive color, and it's definitely sticks in your mind. So what was the process like to come up with that initial clean out bag, and has that evolved over time, or was that the same look from the early days? In the early days it was more plain, right? So it took some time to get to the polka dots. The polka dots is a funny story. So the polka dots actually come from a combination of the idea that polka dots are iconic, right? It's a very recognized thing. And weirdly, the Tour de France bike race, which happens to be going on right now. Because the Tour de France, every year, they award a jersey for the top rider climbing mountains. And that rider wears the polka dot jersey. And I was a cyclist, still am, I was always just enamored with this person who was just the fastest up the mountains. And it spoke to like resilience and like stick-to-itiveness and grit. And I thought like, hey, that's the kind of business like I want ThredUp to be. And so people often think it's about the iconic nature of the polka dot in fashion, but it's actually like 50%
obscure French bike race. But the polka dot is easy to see. The green actually comes just from, it was a little bit more of a Kelly green in the early days. And then it has slowly become mintier. And my team will laugh because I'm actually colorblind.
Really?
And so, I see colors, but I'm red-green colorblind. So it's kind of a joke when people ask me for feedback on the green, because I'm like, you're talking to the wrong guy. So apparently people really like this green. I hear it's great. But yeah, it's sort of it's a part of who we are for now, for sure.
I will never think about polka dots in the same way again. I learned something new. That's fantastic. So from an industry perspective, I'm sure you have a million examples of this, but what is one of the biggest operational challenges that you're seeing in secondhand retail?
I think probably the thing that is hardest to get right for the customer is sizing. So, sizing is hard in traditional new retail, right? Returns are very high for this. There's not a unfortunately, there is truly no universal standard size. Every brand does it a little differently. Every cut's a little different. So you take that and then you multiply that by a decade worth of apparel that's moving through ThredUp, and you've got permutations upon permutations. So I think getting sizing right for secondhand is really, really challenging. We spend a lot of time measuring, trying to help people understand, what will fit. Things shrink. People alter stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got inconsistent brand sizing. You've got 10 years of brand sizing. You've got alterations. You've got shrinking. You've got right. So I think that's the hardest thing to get right. And a lot of the technology we've built is to solve that. And I'm really proud. Actually, we have historically low return rates for our business right now because of all of that. But I think that's really challenging.
Another area that your team spends a tremendous amount of research time on is something that I am a personal fan of, which are these fantastic annual resale market and consumer trend reports.
Yes.
It's truly industry leading, and I get so excited to read it. Not only does it have tremendous information and data about the industry, but as someone who is interested in learning more about the space more generally, it's a must read. So from your perspective, what is an aspect of the resale market that you're still finding that the average consumer is uneducated about?
Funny story about the resale report, just to give you some context. I appreciate all the nice things you just said about it. When we started it, we're now, I think it's the 14th year that we've done it. I remember doing the first resale report. So ThredUp's a brand new company. I remember I go to Karen Clark, who was our first PR marketing person. I'm like, Karen, we're going to do this industry report. She's like, who? For who? I was like, well, people, the industry. She's like, no one's going to read this report. I was like, not now. And she was just like, uh-huh. And so I was like, so we made this report the first year and nobody read it, right? We made it the second year and 10 people read it. And, and so we've really professionalized the report, but I think the team has done this an extraordinary job building this into, I think, an annual sort of telling of what's going on in the state of resale. And so I give them a lot of credit for sticking with it. But the thing I always love about the report is the insights around sellers. And the reason why the industry numbers look so big in the future, right? And this is always why some people are like, well, I can't believe that the resale market's going to double by 2030. I was like, look, it's not my data. We work with global data, independent data research. Their data says when we talk to sellers and people who have sold in secondhand or who have not yet, and we ask them the following questions, here's what we learn. Have you sold something in the last year? That number keeps going up. Are you going to sell more or less in the future? More. If you haven't sold yet, have you ever thought about selling secondhand? No. Has that changed in the last year? Yes. Are you thinking about selling secondhand in the future? Yes. So what you see in these generations that are, right, whether it's millennials to Gen Z to Gen Alpha, right, and on up, is the numbers just keep going like this of people on the seller side. And as you know, the market can only grow when people are selling, right? By definition, you can't buy what people aren't selling. And so I always find that data on sellers fascinating. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, what is that telling us about where to innovate? How do we make it easy for sellers to get involved in ThredUp? And so a lot of what you've seen us launch over the last year is around that. And I think you'll see more of that over the next year.
And on the seller front, that makes sense. What do you think about the actual consumer or customer perspective?
Yeah.
When you're doing this resale report, you're also digging into that side too,
Yes.
right? Are you seeing any interesting trends there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing we see on the buyer side is how much like people are changing their share of closet around secondhand. So we're starting to track this more closely. I think it'll be a big part of next year's report, which is, and I've been saying this for like some time, but just sort of anecdotally, is people don't, once you start shopping secondhand, you don't wake up one day and be like, I'm not going to do that again. This isn't like one of those things where it's a fad. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, now I'm 32. I need to stop that secondhand nonsense, right? Like nobody says that.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, now I need a new dress, or I need a new handbag, or I need to be more responsible. And so I think that's a really fascinating and so when you talk to people around what % of your closet is secondhand, and then you say, well, do you think you're going to buy more or less secondhand in the future? I mean, the numbers that say more are just like off the charts.
Yeah.
And so I think that is really fascinating, of just closet penetration, and people are trying new brands in ways that I think have not, because I think now, to shop secondhand before ThredUp was like a lot of work. And your offline consignment stores, by virtue of being like a small footprint, they can only stock like well-known brands. We sell 35,000 plus brands. So as a secondhand shopper, you now have access to this very long tail of super interesting brands that you may not have ever heard of. And so I think the long tail of brands, closet share, kind of interesting buyer trends.
And going back to the customer, how do you think about customer loyalty and retention, given that the nature of secondhand retail, right? You're buying, even if you get something that you absolutely adore, it's one of one. So how does your company think about really bringing the customer in as advocates of ThredUp and continuing to shop?
I think the number one thing is that we have to just keep getting better at delivering like incredible value. Right. I think value is the name of the game. And I'd like to believe that everybody shops secondhand because of their values. It's just not true. Right. And so people shop secondhand because it's an amazing deal, and it's great for their values. And I think that's true across industries. Right. I think asking people to overpay for sustainability, I think is hard. Right. And I don't think it's fair for your average consumer, right, to have to overpay for secondhand. So like we work very hard to think about, the value to the customer. And so I think it's the value, I think it's the selection, and I think it's being top of mind when they're ready for that next thing. And so that means that the way we do recommendations and personalization and email and your favorites lists and all those things, I think it needs to be really sharp, because I think, again, circling back to laziness or inconvenience is our theme. If there's friction for you to shop secondhand, you don't do it, because the world is full of frictionless experiences. You and I right now in this conversation could have had Amazon and DoorDash, deliver to us like while we've been talking. And so it's an on-demand world. And so for us, I think you need to meet customers where they are. And I think we're trying to do that.
I'd imagine that there are many applications for AI in what you're doing.
It's a whole other podcast.
Yes. And I would love to learn about the areas that you're seeing AI currently being used in the ThredUp model that you're the most excited about.
Yeah, I am. I'm extremely bullish on like what AI can do for the business. I have been a bit of a beating drum around. I think AI is underhyped. I've been saying it for a while, but I keep saying it. I just think it's going to transform all of our lives. I think for ThredUp in particular, it, because of the nature of our catalog, right? Everything is unique. Right now there are 4.5 million unique SKUs on ThredUp. That means we took all those pictures. We added all that data, right? We figured out how to recommend it to millions of customers today. So because of the unique nature of the problem, we're using AI everywhere. And I think the most interesting part is on search and discovery. So if I take you back probably 3 or 4 years, we would get an item so you get your shirt in and we would tag it. We would say, it's this brand, it's this size, it's got this sleeve cut, right? We try and describe like the nature of the garment. And we'd add 5, 6 things. Okay. But that garment has so much more about it, right? How it could be merchandised, like how people might style it. Now we're taking the same garment and running it through some AI services that we've both purchased and then we've built, and it's giving us 100 ways to describe it.
Wow.
100 different styles it could be worn with. And so that is sort of changing the game for us on the merchandising side. So that's one. The second is, if you've ever been on ThredUp, you'll know we don't have any lifestyle photography like of the item. So like we can't shoot that pair of jeans on a form that would make you feel like, oh, I'm that size and I see how they might drape on me the way you can wherever you bought those jeans. We're going to do that in a material way such that everything you'll shop on ThredUp over the next year, you'll be able to see what it looks like on a human form. If you want, you could maybe look at what it might look like on you. You could play sort of dress up and mix and match how to style stuff, visually on ThredUp. And those are all things that like we couldn't do a year ago. And so yeah, I'm pretty excited about how we can both make ThredUp more fun, like a digital styling, thrifting, scrapbooky, Pinteresty kind of style on the one hand, and then just high fidelity shopping experience so that no longer can you be like, oh, when I shop on Nordstrom, it feels amazing. And then I go to ThredUp and like, the photos aren't great. I don't know how it fits. I want it to feel indistinguishable. And I think AI is going to help that happen.
Yeah, it sounds like everything that you just described, it's really, whether you want to call it leveling the playing field or really just having this incremental step change in the experience in the UX that a customer experiences when they're browsing for clothes.
Yeah, I think you described it exactly right. It's the closing the gap, right, around shopping new and shopping used. And the other thing is like, I don't know about you, but shopping new, it's become a little stale. Like e-commerce in the US. It's just kind of utilitarian. It's pretty boring. You can see a lot of innovation starting to take place in experiential retail. So you can see brands are trying to figure out, okay, if I have a stale e-commerce experience, I better make my stores fun and interesting. But it's hard to do that in e-commerce online. And I actually think there's a market opportunity for ThredUp to be a really fun place to shop and style and be creative and build looks. And my youngest daughter has one of those style guides where you can kind of change the top, change the shirt, change the pants, right? And she just has this fun like sticker book. And I think there's stuff like that could be really enjoyable for people over time.
And I think going back to what we were talking about earlier around almost the reasons why someone would not get into the secondhand space if they hadn't done it before. And I'd imagine that if you're not used to it or you're comparing the traditional e-commerce retail experience to secondhand, it's a different kind of experience. And this will, I think, probably help with adoption for specifically that first time user.
I think that's exactly right. I think people will come to it. And it's so funny. I love now, just even over the last few months, I get a lot of customer emails because I try to be very approachable. I get customer emails every day. And the number of people who reply and like, is this stuff secondhand?
Wow.
Right. And so we're doing such a good job that people are like, they're surprised, right? Almost to the point we've had people go through the entire experience, check out, get their order, and then complain, right? These items you sent me are used. It's like, yes, that's what we do, right? But I love that like we've built a front end commerce experience where the packaging that feels great. Like I'm like, but wait a minute, there's no tag on this item. So I think that's a real testament to the work the team's doing.
All right. I want to ask you about two relatively new-ish or more current events that are going on that are very big in the world and specifically definitely impacting the retail space. So I'd love to talk about this de minimis exemption,
Sure.
right? ThredUp has stated publicly that this exemption has provided an unfair advantage to fast fashion retailers, enabling them to flood the market with low-cost items while circumnavigating these import duties.
Yep.
So I'd love to get your take on where things stand now.
Yeah, it's remarkable how smart Americans have gotten on tariff policy and loopholes. And so yeah, the de minimis exemption is, so for a long time, if you were shipping goods into the US and those goods were under $800. So for example, you buy something from anywhere in the world, right? Europe, right? And it's $500 and they ship it to you directly. There's no tariff, which seems totally like reasonable, right? From a trade policy perspective, this is an individual merchant sending it to an individual person in the US. It's all reasonable. If you're making stuff overseas and then you're bringing it into the US, all the stuff we buy at all of our favorite retailers, you land the goods in the US, you pay duties, import duties to land it at a US port and so forth. This loophole has existed for this under $800 for a long time. And it is now being exploited. It has been exploited by sort of large, primarily Chinese retailers, where instead of, while they're competing with traditional retail, they're shipping everything in these very small packages direct to US customers and therefore not having to pay any duties on it. I have a huge problem with this for two reasons. One is it's not competitive. Everybody else that you're buying stuff from has to pay these, so their costs are higher. The second is it's terrible for the environment. These things are being air freighted in Boeing 747s, like direct from China. At one point, the Sheins and Temus, it was 100 jets a day full of these tiny little packages. And remember, those jets also have to go back to pick up, right? So just the amount of carbon that's being used, to then skirt U.S. tax law, I think is a problem. So we've been very public that closing that loophole is good for everyone. It's good for the planet. It's good for a level playing field. And so that's kind of where we are on de minimis. And I think the Trump administration has done a very good job of closing that loophole and saying, hey, you got to all play by the same rules. And we think it's a good thing.
Speaking of other hot topics, the tariffs of them all.
I've heard of this, yes.
Yes. How are tariffs impacting the ThredUp business more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, so the short answer is it's evolving, right? Because a lot of the tariff policy, so the administration announced it in early April. There's been changes, rollbacks, delays. Even now, I think it's unclear what's happening and when. So the answer is, I'm not sure how it's impacting us today, right? But I will tell you that if tariffs stay in place and they stay in place for a period of time, I think the net effect is that prices will go up on apparel. If you talk to most apparel manufacturers or retailers, they'll say, look, I can't absorb 25, 30% increases on my cost of goods, and so I'm gonna have to pass some of that on to customers. We will not have that same problem, right? Everything we have is sourced domestically from closets like yours. And so in theory, and I say in theory because I don't know, in theory, ThredUp should be more competitive on price in the future if traditional retailers have to raise prices. How that plays out, who knows, right? Like the bull case is prices go up, ThredUp is more competitive, more people shop secondhand, kumbaya, everybody's happy. The bear case is prices go up on all kinds of stuff and consumers all of a sudden have to cut back broadly in their spending, and it's much worse than people think, and then who knows?
Regardless, ThredUp seems to be more shielded or
relatively
protected.
We should be better off. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about the standard consumer who participates in the ThredUp ecosystem, but I also want to mention the B2B side.
Yeah.
So ThredUp has done partnerships with major retailers, Walmart, Madewell. There are many and really countless partnerships over the years. Are resale as a service deals the biggest B2B opportunity for ThredUp?
I think that so just to describe like what resale as a service is for people who may not know, right? So we're trying to power this for brands who are helping them. So if you go to jcrew.com, for example, there is a pre-loved tab on jcrew.com. We power that. If you go into an Athleta store, right, you can pick up a clean out kit that's co-branded ThredUp and Athleta, send it back to us. We process it and give you Athleta credit. So I think in both of those examples, what we're trying to do is help brands really play in the resale ecosystem, because I just think if you think about how big ThredUp is today, million plus customers, you add in sellers, couple million, folks. Look, there are hundreds of millions of Americans, right? 300 million Americans. They are touched by the broad retail ecosystem every day in ways that we can't, reach them. And so Athleta probably has 10 million customers. J.Crew probably has 10 million people on their email list. So what the sort of position that I take is like, I love to help them be part of the solution. Mm-hmm. I love to figure out how do we build a big tent where the J.Crews, the Reformations, the Athletas, all are helping build a more sustainable circular future. And so to me, I think about it less as, is it the best economic opportunity? But is it like, do we ultimately build a bigger ecosystem? And I think if you have a big ecosystem in secondhand, I'll take my chances that if there's more people shopping secondhand and selling secondhand in the future, that's going to be good for us.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I'm gonna invite everyone to the party and serve lots of good food and drinks and hope everybody stays, for the next couple of decades.
If we were to fast forward 5 years, what is one thing that ThredUp is not doing anymore?
Oh, not going. I can't. We talked strategy. I can't tell you the things that we're going to kill. Not going to do. I would say, look, I think right now, and 5 years is actually the right time frame. Right now, I'm saying no to lots of stuff that we could do to chase a quick buck. There's lots of things, whether it's partnerships, whether it's leveraging our distribution network for other things. There's lots of ways that like we could squeeze out an incremental dollar that would be good for us over the next 12 months. And I'm staying focused. Like I really want us to build a dominant, leading company in the secondhand space. I want the customer experience to be better than ever. And so what I would say is that 5 years from now, I would bet that I'm not saying no to as many things as I say no today, because I think at that point we'll be in a position to say yes in ways that are complementary over the long term, mm-hmm. right? And that might be other categories in the U.S., that might be other price points in the U.S., that might be other places beyond the U.S. So I think for now we'll stay pretty focused, but I'll probably say yes again at some point 5 years from now.
This is another toughie. What is your most contrarian view on the future of retail?
I think the days of like brands sort of breaking out and like big like anchor brands, the way the Nikes and Adidas's, the J.Crews of the world have like built heritage. Ralph Lauren's a great example. I think it's going to be nearly impossible to build brands like that in the future. And I think there are customer challenges with that, supply chain. I think the number one thing is attention. I just think that what you're going to continue to see is these niche brands that launch, get to 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 million, maybe they get to 100 million, and then they just roll over. Because I think what's so interesting about the way that people discover these things is that we discover them through creators and influencers and people who are selling us the next thing. If you think about that industry, it needs to find the next thing. Mm. By definition, you can't make money in the influencer creator economy by talking about Nike. Like you can, but you know what I mean? Like you got to find the next thing. I mean, that's how a lot of the TikTok and Instagram world is built. And so I see a lot of brands, and I know because we talk to them, we work with them. They get to some modest size, and then you can just see them roll over. And so I think people think there's more opportunity for brands to build breakout in retail, and I don't agree.
All right. I love that take. That's a good one. Okay. We're going to the last 3 questions I ask every guest. First, can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career or business?
Oh, yeah. I mean, on the business side, like I'm very systematic about communications. So I think as organizations get bigger, the thing that CEOs and management teams need to learn is to really systematize how we communicate information and like what we're trying to do throughout the organization. So I think about this in the cadence of like a weekly like staff meeting with my team, bi-weekly updates that we send out company-wide, the Slack channels that we use to talk about what we're doing and why, a monthly all hands, quarterly retreats. So like I literally have like a plan of like, hey, this is what we do on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, a monthly basis, quarterly basis, an annual basis. And I think it's served us well because it's easy when you get really busy to start being like, cancel the all hands. Like, let's get back to work. And no, we're actually going to do one tomorrow at 9:30.
There you go.
The same way we've been doing it for the last 10 years.
Great. So the next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend that is impacting business and culture. And I would love to talk about live shopping. So live shopping is growing tremendously year over year.
Yeah.
So how do you think about the state of traditional shopping versus live shopping? And would ThredUp ever get into the live shopping space?
I don't like to be like a hater. I'm not sold on live shopping.
Really?
Even though, so again, I'm not saying that it's not going to be huge, right? I'm not convinced that over the long term, like that's how people are going to want to like consume goods. I think you saw this with, so QVC, HSN, right? I mean, they clearly like invented this, but there was a ceiling for how big those businesses ultimately were. Like the number of people who were going to watch TV and order on QVC and order on HSN. I think the same thing's going to be true for live shopping. The number of people who are truly going to look at their phones, right, or look at their computers and actively engage in that shopping way. So I guess I think that the TAM, the total addressable market for live shopping, is smaller than other people. So maybe that's my other contrarian thing about retail. But people do it and people love it. I think it's going to be hard for ThredUp to pull off because everything we have is unique. Mm-hmm. So I think in order for us to do it, we have to be creative around how we merchandise like those individual units. And so it's certainly an area that like we talk about. We just haven't kind of quite cracked it.
Got it.
I'll come back in a few years and you'll tell me I'm wrong. That live shopping is crushing it and everyone's doing it. I also am biased because like there's not anybody in my life circle. Like everybody, it's always other people are doing it on the internet, but I don't know anyone who has bought something on live shopping. And so, other than my mom on QVC, right? Or HSN back in the day, and she'd be like, yes.
Yeah. So for me personally, I am in the same boat as you, where no one in my immediate network has done it. Some of them don't even know what it is. When I say it's like the QVC, but modernized for today, and it has its separate app, then people say, oh, I get it. But I had the CEO of Whatnot on.
Yeah, sure.
Who, of course,
it's a huge company. It's a huge
massive.
Company. Yeah.
And to be honest, when I was doing the research for that episode, I still wasn't convinced.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I know this is a massive company. Let me just do my due diligence and come up with my point of view on it. And the numbers are crazy. I know the numbers are crazy. And look, people I think underestimate how big a business QVC and HSN were. Yeah. Like I don't, and so I think the question is do you hit that ceiling? Yeah. And then it's really flat, and does it? So the question I think will be, can they break out of this like set of natural adopters? Yeah. Okay. Very last question for you. And this is a listener question.
Okay.
So this question comes from Anna. What is the most surprising consumer behavior that you've witnessed as you've scaled ThredUp?
Like social shopping hasn't broken out. So in the way of like, the saving on Pinterest, right? The saving on following on Instagram. Like I'm surprised that you've got these behemoths, Facebook, right? Where, and yet they haven't quite cracked commerce. And so I just find it odd that And to your point about like live shopping, so why aren't the Instagram shopping business or the Pinterest shopping business or the TikTok why aren't they just much like order of magnitudes bigger than they are given the audience? And so I keep waiting and wondering like what's broken, or not broken, but like when it's gonna sort of really change behavior. But again, the same thing is like when I talk to people about if you bought something off of Instagram, people say that it's more than live shopping, but it's not like a regular thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm just surprised given how much time people spend on those apps. So.
Yeah, that is surprising. I'm with you on that.
If you compare like the amount of time, right, of spend and then the commerce that happens.
Yep.
Right? It's versus the amount of time, take Amazon as the opposite, which is the amount of time you spend on Amazon. And again, I realize they're different, but I'm surprised they haven't been able to bridge that gap a little better.
Yeah. That's a great note to end on. James, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I will link the handles to ThredUp in the show notes. And my one call out to listeners is I highly encourage everyone to visit the ThredUp resale report that we were talking about earlier, because it's such a fascinating deep dive into the trends in the industry. And it's actually where I learned, and I got this directly from the report, that the US secondhand apparel market is expected to reach $74 billion by 2029. And that's growing 9% annually on average, which is just mind-blowing. Yep. So I'm very excited to watch ThredUp grow. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.